Hello, Max Wright here from Success Council, and I received a question on the YouTube channel for Success Council today. It was by a James Enderby, and he's basically calling for socialism and suggesting, what's so bad about that? Why shouldn't we do that? And it's a pretty relevant question because Russell Brand just recently did a fantastic interview in which the journalist was defending the status quo, and Russell Brand just brilliantly just articulated some of the problems, just a few of the problems that the current system has and how literally disgusting it is, and wiped the floor with him. But at the end of the interview, after I've been nodding with him for 20 minutes or however long the interview was, his suggested solution was socialism. And we see this so often. It reminds me, you can jump on Netflix or YouTube, and there's literally hundreds, maybe even thousands by now. They seem to come out every week. Great documentaries just highlighting just some of the disasters going on in the world and just why we should have absolute contempt for the current system. Movies like Zeitgeist, there's one called The Four Horsemen. I've watched hundreds of them. There's so many of them. And what happens with these videos for like 2 hours, you're sitting there nodding your head as they brilliantly just describe the problem. And they're like, yes, yes, central banking, the Federal Reserves, that's just counterfeiting. That's how they're stealing money from me. This is bad. It's got to stop. Yes, yes. Wars are a joke. They're a racket. We're just murdering innocent brown people on the other side of the planet just so we can steal trillions of dollars from us to send to the military and their hardware manufacturers. Yes, yes, all this has got to stop. For 2 hours, you can just nod your head as they brilliantly describe the problem. And then you get to the end of these documentaries and you get 360 degrees different opinions on what the solutions are. So because of all of these problems, we need fascism, we need socialism, we need communism, we need anarchy, we need libertarianism, we need everything. And this has happened many, many times throughout history. And probably the one that we are most familiar with is probably Adolf Hitler. We've all seen pictures of him in black and white, and you can't even understand what he's saying unless you speak German. But his hair's flopping around, he's banging his fist, and he's whipping the crowd up into a frenzy, and he's brilliantly articulating how evil and corrupt the system is. The reparation payments they had to do from World War I that the governments got together and made Germany pay. The crash of the Weimar Republic, which created hyperinflation, which is one of the key causes of the wealth disparity at the time. And because he brilliantly and articulately described the problem, and there was just people around defending the status quo, of course he won those arguments. And he got the crowd into a frenzy, and he got them to vote him into power. Obviously, the solution of murdering people who disagree with you and you find not to your liking is obviously not the best solution out there. But that's what's possible when people are desperate and they've been victimized for so long. They've been at the receiving end of just such corruption and the powers that be destroying their livelihoods, that level of anger comes along, and anybody who can articulate the problem well is seen. Some people believe that they also have a great solution. And so, although definitely we need to move quickly to stop the corruption and what's going on at the moment, we also want to be very, very careful because these are very, very dangerous times. It was out of economic collapses and disasters that we had Lenin's and Mao Zedong's and North Korea, some of the biggest disasters the world has ever seen was created because someone could brilliantly and articulately describe the problems of the past. We gave them a ton of power, and they ended up doing something far, far worse. So let's just take a critical look at socialism and what it's describing and what it's suggesting. And I feel like before we get into this, we need to just backtrack a little bit because we need to understand there are so many assumptions in this argument that are just patently false. They're just completely wrong. But virtually everyone in society believes them to be true. And I have an opinion on this as to why this is. And I think it's important to start there. If you sent a child along to a Catholic school from aged 5 to age 18 and then went to Catholic university, they were there till 22. So from age 5 to 22, this child goes to a Catholic school and university, you would pretty much assume that it's very likely that that child would be propagandized in some way that they would come out the other end a Catholic. Most of the kids going into that school would come out the other side a Catholic. Like it's the same thing with a Jewish school, with a Muslim school, with you name it, any kind of religion. A child taken and educated from 5 to 18 or 22 is most likely going to come out the other end with their opinions slanted in favor of that particular religion. Well, we have an entire planet that for the last several generations have been to a government school. And we don't recognize that as we like to believe that it's a place of education. But I think it's reasonable to understand and believe that there's a tainting there where maybe the government-run schools have, tainted society. Me too. I went to a public school. That maybe government is more of a solution than it otherwise should be, and less of a problem than it really is. And so we come out of school, in these formative years, we're being, to some level indoctrinated, and we have some beliefs that are just absolutely false. And I'm going to start with some like really, really common ones. In fact, I mentioned the email here from James. He said here, it says, the government has to intervene with taxes so the poorest citizens can survive. Now, this is absolutely insane, yet it's a belief held by the vast majority of people. Let me just go through a couple of examples about how this might not be true. Let's take America and China. America, standard of living, let's go back 20, 30 years, standard of living up here, China, standard of living down here. Now, what do? We create free trade zones. We abolish all of the bureaucracy and government and BS in between those two blocks, and we allowed free trade between those two countries. Unbridled capitalism, let's say. No restrictions on what they can trade. And what do you know? Within a couple of decades, the standard of living of America has crashed, and the standard of living for the average Chinese person has skyrocketed. Wealth flowed from rich to poor, right? And that's a 1.3 billion person experiment. That's statistically significant. So without any regulation, money flowed from rich to poor. It's not what we're told happens. We have to take money off the rich and give it to the poor because everyone knows money makes money, and the people who have money just makes more money. The people who are poorer just get poorer, and the wealth disparity increases. It's false. Let's look at the two countries individually. In China, there's a 1 billion person experiment. In China, over the last 2 decades, has there been more freedoms? Has it become more free and bureaucracy eased? The answer is yes. Quality of living went up. Let's look in America. Has the bureaucracy increased or shrunk? Bureaucracy's increased. Has the quality of life of the average American certainly slowed down? At least most would argue has gone down. You can look at this time and time again. Where government expands, generally the wealth disparity increases, and where government shrinks, the wealth disparity decreases. And so this is something that we really need to get our heads around. Now, a question we might ask ourselves is why would this theme be throughout society? And this, I believe, is going to shock pretty much everybody. We believe that the mega rich, the 1%, let's call them, the powers that be, they're unbridled capitalists. And if they just got governments off the back and we deregulated them and they could just go crazy with it and allow their money to make more money, then they'd be very, very happy. And, that what they're shooting for is capitalism. And I can tell you nothing is further from the truth. These mega wealthy companies, first of all, if the mega wealthy companies really wanted less bureaucracy and more freedom in America, for example, there would have been an incredible amount of money pouring behind a libertarian candidate like Ron Paul or the Libertarian Party. There wouldn't be money pouring behind, the Republicans and the Democrat mainstream. That would make no sense because they want less regulation. Both of those parties are in favor of more regulation. So that makes no sense. Now let's look at this carefully. Let's look at the truly mega wealthy people. People in charge of the banking system. People, owners owning and controlling the military-industrial complex who sell arms and weapons and bombs. Let's look at the pharmaceutical industry. All of these mega giant corporations, most of them are household names, we know them. We're told that they're capitalists and we need government to hold them back and tax them and redistribute wealth. But look at what really happens. What happens is these companies get bailouts. These companies get government contracts. These companies, now with healthcare, with Obamacare, you are now forced to buy a product from one of the 14 companies that have been Obamacare approved. This is just government either outright stealing your money through taxation and giving it to the mega wealthy, or it's government putting a gun to your head and say, buy a product from one of my friends or I'll fine you. This is what's going on. So these people who we think are capitalists, we think they're capitalists just because they're rich. That's insane. Rich does not make a person a capitalist. When Stalin was, when 20 million of his people were starving, he wasn't missing out on any meals. He wasn't renting out bedroom number 43 in the Kremlin. He was very, very rich, but no one would call him a capitalist. We've got this little fat Korean guy here in North Korea. His whole country is like starving. There's like some of the horror stories coming out of there. Our parents are actually cannibalizing their own children because they can't eat. They're starving to death. And you got Kim Jong fat fuck there. He hasn't missed a meal anytime soon. But no one's calling him a capitalist, even though he's certainly very, very rich. And you've got to get past this. Just because a person is rich, generally the people who are involved in government and have government favors, they're the richest. Now, a capitalist doesn't interact with government in any way, shape, or form. It's that he pays his taxes because he has to, but he certainly doesn't go there looking for favors. He certainly doesn't go there looking for the government to harass his competitors out of business and get monopoly favors. This is all behavior of people who advocate big governments. And so these people who we call capitalists because they own big companies in the West, multinational corporations, and are worth billions, if not trillions, please stop calling them capitalists. They are not. They are in bed with government. They work together with government to use the monopoly of force of government to either extract money from you directly through taxation and give it to them, or force you to be their customer, or destroy their competition to give them monopoly prices and monopoly powers, and therefore monopoly prices. So if they're not capitalists, what are they? Well, if a person is an advocate of governments taking from some group of people and giving to another people, what is that? That's socialism. Now, I know socialists will be very, very upset with this because no, socialism is when you take money off the rich and give it to the poor. No, that's not true. That's what is sold. That's what we would hope would happen in a socialist environment. But it very, very, very rarely happens that way. In the same way, an anarchist might say, well, without government, we'll have this utopian environment where we're all trading amicably and very, very friendly. Well, trading amicably and being very, very friendly is what we hope an anarchist society would bring. But what an anarchist society is just means a society without a state, without this animal that has the power to just take and distribute resources. We hope it will be a utopian society. With socialism, what it is granting this particular entity the ability to take and give. And what we hope it will bring is a utopian, the money flows from rich to the poor, but that's not what happens. So these schooling systems, media outlets that are very, very leftist leaning, this money comes from the mega wealthy, the people that you're trying to take money off. And it will never, ever, ever happen. When income tax was created in 1913 in the United States, in that very same year, the tax-exempt foundation was created. And so Carnegie and Rockefeller and all those people took all their wealth, put it in this tax haven. They never paid inheritance tax. They never paid income tax. And it was never, ever designed for the wealthy. It was designed from the get-go to be used as a mechanism to steal from people below the top level. And as time goes on, decades go past, wealthy people use their resources to bribe politicians and get favors, get loopholes, get tax exemptions, get all these kinds of political favors to reduce their tax. And what happens over time is you end up with you get to a point where there's no point taxing the poor, they haven't got anything to tax. The rich have all bribed politicians to get special exemptions. And the middle class, they haven't got enough money to bribe politicians to do anything, but as a collective group, they do have enough resources to be stolen. What happens is eventually the state sucks all of that wealth out of the middle class. It pushes the vast majority of those middle class people into the ranks of the poor, and you just have this very, very elite cream of the crop sitting on top. And this happens under all totalitarian systems. Every single one. Eventually, they get there. Even if the first leader is particularly noble and actually does use their powers to steal from these people and give these people wisely, the next leader or the next leader or the next leader eventually will be corrupted by this power. And they use that power to give themselves political favors and their friends who pay them handsomely for it. And what we're seeing now, it's happening all across the world at the same time. The entire Western world is just crumbling under this cesspool of corruption. And what I find tragic and scary is that people can watch this. You can look at the system. You can see how disgusting it is. And you think, yes, what we need to solve this problem is more government. Give this entity, which has the power to steal, give them more power to steal. And then we'll vote for a good guy. or hopefully a good leader will come along. And it is absolutely insane. So I hope this helps. That's my thoughts on socialism, and I welcome your feedback below.